Welcome back to the Gamemode Creative Podcast, a podcast for Minecraft builders. I am Meg.
And I'm Rainboom, and we're back with another episode indeed. I am looking forward to this one. I mean, what do you think? It's been a while, Meg, since
Yeah,
we,
it's
or
been a
not really.
while. We kind of
Well,
we're a little bit late on this one, later than we were hoping, but
yeah.
we're
Yeah,
finally
relative
here.
to our schedule. Yes. Yes, that's what matters, even if we may be over by whatever number of weeks this is compared to the
We've both
intended
been
release.
busy, haven't we?
That is true. That is true. For me, I mean, life with work and how much time out of your week work takes, especially if it's your full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, at least I've had a little bit of time even for things like building, although that has been very slow these days, especially with my city project. I don't know if you've tuned in from previous episodes where I've talked about this, and
Oh yeah, how's the
it's been
city
an
going?
ongoing, it's been very slow. But I will say it's been moving because I have had some builds from there that have been shared recently on my Instagram. Still pretty dead as it is, which is a very occasional build sharing space. But it moves along. But I also kind of think and realize that a lot of the projects I work on at a time, especially if I share them or progress shots, they're usually big projects. They're not things like a simple house or one little
Right,
part
right.
of the city. So it's usually a bigger building, like the office tower that I shared some time ago. That was a big project that took me about half a year to finish because of the limited time I had to work with to begin with, and then on top of that, the complexity of the project because I didn't
This has
realize.
nothing to do with our actual topic for today, but do you think you'd ever get burnt out from working on one thing for so long, which is basically a city? Do you ever feel like you'll get tired
Yeah.
of it, or is it something that you'll think you'll still be interested in years to come?
Well, I would like to be optimistic to think that I'll be able to
Yeah.
stick with it for a while. However, not to say that I haven't had my share of burnout. Now, burnout not because of the city, but probably because of running out of ideas. I think it's
Oh,
lacking
yeah.
inspiration and finding, oh, I need to find some way to take myself out of Minecraft just to reinvigorate that
Yeah.
inspiration or that drive, right? Sometimes you kind of hit those patches where you're going, gee, I've been trying to find this inspo. I can't find it. Do I need to take a walk? Do we need to go take a long drive somewhere to find this in real life or something? Which is where I actually find a lot of my inspo for my case. So, as jokingly as it might be, where you may have to touch grass, as some people may figuratively say, it's true for me. That's how I get my inspo. But I mean, you, Meg, you've been pretty busy, right? For projects also. I mean, you've got some, I guess,
Yeah.
semi-secretive stuff that you've been doing,
I
maybe?
I've been working on so many random builds, whether it be for an actual video or for just a side project that's completely unrelated. Like, oh, on a whim, I'm gonna make this build and spend 50 hours doing it that I don't really have
Yeah.
time for. But I don't know. I've been trying to do a lot of extra stuff that isn't necessarily content related. And because of that, my actual video production has been slowed way down. But I still have tons of videos I'm planning on doing. It's just I'm trying to do other things in addition to that, and that's just taking up a lot of my time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a whole build in was it March? Yeah, there, in a couple weeks I did an entire build that's
Yes.
completely unrelated to the other build I'm currently working on. The build I
Mhm.
just finished or am finishing, I'm trying to work on the time lapse for it now. It's been a build that's been in the works since November,
Oh,
but
wow.
then I took a break from it for about 2 months and then I started working on it again. So I started it,
Right.
but I was in the middle of a different build. So I finished that
Uh-huh.
one first. Then I jump back into this one. I jump all over the place because there's too many things going on at once for me. And it's hard to prioritize
But I think it helps so it keeps your mind fresh so you're not focused on the one project
in
and then
some
potentially
ways,
like in mine getting burnt
but then
out,
I
right?
feel
But in
guilty when
fairness,
I don't
yeah.
post often enough.
Well, look at me. I post maybe once a year,
And
twice a
I'm
year,
talking
up to
mainly to
three times,
YouTube,
but
though. You don't post to
oh, that's fair.
YouTube.
That's true. No, that is even rarer if I do post. I think the last video I posted was the office building tour of that build. But in fairness, I was going to say that we've been actually sidetracked by some projects, Meg. I know you kind of did something kind of for fun on the side recently as well.
Oh, yeah, and I have
And
another one
even
I'm doing for fun.
oh boy, okay.
Yep.
Even for me, because there was this house that as of this recording, which is I guess early April, shall we say, I actually released or shared a house that I built. That house was entirely a side project because I just decided one day, hey, let me turn this currently modern house into something a bit more mid-century using the same materials, and we'll see what happens. And I thought I was going to get it done in one stream. evidently that did not happen. It obviously spilled beyond one, and I think went into maybe six or seven. It was definitely a multi-week project. It was supposed to be just a one-off
Yeah, you know
session because
what?
I thought it was going to be fast, right?
That
You
you know
know,
what's
but
funny about that is the build I'm currently working on. It's been taking me months. It started out just like that. It's like, hey, let me just try this on the side for fun, and then it developed into
oh,
this
really?
massive project over several months. And I'm like, well, that was a fun experiment that took 5 months to make.
Thank you, Meg. Now I don't feel as bad for that particular
Putting
project.
all of my
Really?
and
It was on a
yeah,
whim,
it's
really?
terrible. And then I think of 10 new ideas in the
Oh,
process of building one thing, and I'm like, oh, I want
okay.
to go start this new thing, but I can't. I gotta finish this other one first. I have the opposite problem as you. I have too many ideas, and they're all battling for the number one spot. Is like, which one's gonna be next? I don't know because
What's
there's
going
too
to be
many.
front and center on Meg's mind? You know what, though? I've been having that lately because I've been starting to plan what I'm going to do next to the city. The problem with that is even though I have stuff that I'm currently doing in stream, my mind is drawn to all the empty spaces that are currently in the city. And I'm going, I think this space could use this building. Or, oh, I wanted to get this one done in the new scale. But everywhere I look, there's always a building I want to do. And I have about the same amount of inspo or about readiness, I'd probably say, for each of these buildings, but never actually, none of them really battle for the top. Like they're all roughly the same in terms of how much inspo I have. And so the problem is, I know that if I start one of them, I'm going to get stuck somewhere in the middle because it's not
Hmm.
quite fully conceived as an idea. They're all just really cool ideas, but none of them are really cool and full ideas. So I've been trying to be a little more selective of my builds. But I think that I mean, I'm glad that I have it. Otherwise, I would probably be stuck trying to figure out, I wonder what kind of building I want to do now.
And you know this does lead in pretty well into our actual topic for today, where we're gonna talk
I
about
didn't think about that. Yeah, actually,
yeah,
it does. You're right.
where we're gonna talk about how do you
Ah,
decide. Well, it's gonna need to be multiple things kind of meshed into one. How do you
yes.
decide what
Yep.
to build, and finding your own style when building? So we're gonna kind of combine those two concepts. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It almost feels like one comes from the other, where it's like if you want to find a starting point with what to build and then leading into being more consistent and figuring out your identity
If
in
you need
Minecraft
one, and
from a
if you need
building
one,
perspective.
because
Yes. Oh, that's true. That
yeah.
also. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the first things I always wonder and think back when I reflect back, I've actually got a lot of people that have asked me, for example, they say, Rainboom, where did you start city building, or what got you to start what you do, or why did you develop that style? And it's funny because a lot of these questions have come up so recently, and it's gotten me thinking because I never thought about it. I just started and just kind of went out there with the ambition in Minecraft to say I want to try to build a realistic something that looks good eh, on in Minecraft as if it was realistic. And but then with all these questions that have come, it's made me think a lot deeper than simply just that. And I think there are a lot of layers that come into this. I think we were having this conversation earlier too about me and just my general love of mid-century. Now that's obviously something that is from a more recent, I think, take on a lot of my builds
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of my builds recently have mostly been of the mid-century kind. But I think for me, really just starting was that I just came into Minecraft with a particular goal of a kind of building that I wanted to do. Now, I was never much of a survival player myself when I started back in 2014 or 15 or so. Well, I say 2014 because I started briefly, did a couple months of it, put it aside, and then only came back until about 2016 or so when I really started coming on to servers often or opening a particular world more often. So, but still, even at that point, like I knew that I wanted to try to build stuff that was realistic compared to most people just building stuff for the purposes of the game. Because back then, we didn't have many people that were doing large scale buildings, at least not that I knew of, or at least if they did, they probably had to do them by hand because I don't believe World Edit was around yet during that time. It could have been, but it was very new. And I know any kind of large cathedral building, I think it was mostly cathedrals back then, those were already big. And I remember those being impressive. Almost kind of like, I feel like we were talking about this with Bond in the last episode, like sort of how tools have come about. But, anyways,
Mm-hmm.
move on to that other tangent. Yeah, so the most I could do was just those very stereotypical modern houses. The ones that had the clean, straight lines were probably made up of quartz and some kind of wooden material because they just happened to look good in game. And I think when I think about that though, I realize that there are several textures in Minecraft, in vanilla Minecraft. Now there are people that do texture packs, but vanilla Minecraft that still could look pretty convincing if you use them a certain way. And I think having that as my challenge, even if back then I already found constraints of, oh, I want to replicate this color or this texture from real life, but there's no Minecraft block that would do it. So I would be super tempted to pull up a texture pack to kind of remedy that
Hmm.
problem. But even the vanilla textures I found, there was kind of an interesting a realism to some of them that I said, if I use these in the right way, I might just be able to pull off a certain type of build. And I think from there, just going one build after another, that's kind of what started me getting into my drive to get into
And
more realistic and convincing buildings. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
and you know what's interesting about bringing up the whole types of blocks in Minecraft and the default textures is the different types of styles that you see people doing in Minecraft. A lot of them have developed because of all of the new blocks that are introduced, which is
Oh
interesting
yeah.
to think about because when you think about Minecraft in the early years, everyone was building medieval because that
Yep.
was the block palette we had. We had a lot of wood and a lot
Yes.
of stone.
hmm
So,
Medieval or ultra modern, because then there was quartz, and that was like what I
right.
mentioned with the quartz and wood. You pretty much had one or the other. There wasn't much in between. There might have been a few fantasy pieces here and there, but I think most of those, even that, looked more medieval than it did, I think,
Hmm.
fantasy,
And
like
then
what
with
we'd
the
probably
color
call it now.
update and other updates,
Yeah.
all of the new blocks are being added, introduce new concepts, new ideas. I'm very interested actually. I was trying to think through all of the different building styles, if you will, because people always talk about, oh, I'm not sure what style to build in or I'm finding a style,
Uh-huh.
but styles seem to be there seems to be new ones or new concepts always being added as blocks are being added. I mean, some of them already exist, but when new blocks are added, they just kind of reinforce that style. For example, with the new blocks that are coming in 1.21, right? Is that the next one
Yeah.
update?
As of this recording, yes.
As of this recording, um, I haven't looked at them in game myself, but I know about the copper, all the different copper blocks and tough blocks. When I see those, I just think steampunk. And steampunk
Yeah.
is already a style in and of itself, but that's just going to reinforce it even more and
Or enhance it, yeah.
yeah,
I
enhance
think
it.
it'll help to really bring about much more steampunk looking builds. And it
Right.
almost feels like, to your point where you're talking about the different styles, it's like everything almost is an offshoot of either medieval or modern, which is kind of funny because you
Hmm.
could think of steampunk as an extension of medieval
Or
in a sense
fantasy
with other
and
elements.
realism.
Yes, exactly. Fantasy, realism, and then all these other styles that are offshoots of those two. Just because new blocks introduced, it just makes them easier to try to replicate or to build in game, and makes them more convincingly like those styles. Even modern, when all the stripped wood variants came out, oh my goodness, I was all over the thing because I loved to work with them, to play around with, because they worked fantastically for wooden walls. I was always having this problem prior to that update where everything looked so harsh because all of the wood textures, the
And they all
logs,
blended
as
with
they
each other
were,
too.
even better when they were stripped, because when they
Yeah.
were the original variants, they were very harsh and they were always contrasting. So you couldn't exactly use, I mean, I wasn't exactly much of a texturing person back in those days anyway, but if I look back now and I had the knowledge, or I guess kind of my approach that I have now back then, even with those few blocks, I would find lots of trouble trying to texture properly because of the fact that a lot of those blocks weren't very close to each other. They were harder to texture and make them look more seamless. All right, so that you could clearly see. I think, let's say if you try to incorporate any of those wooden blocks, not the planks, but the actual, like the tree logs or whatever, and using those side textures, mixing them with other blocks, I feel like you would clearly see those tree blocks stand out and would exactly feel like a really good pattern or whatever the case might be, right? So it's interesting seeing how all the new blocks, although we're still missing some colors, like I think blue blocks are still
Oh,
in the
yeah.
works somewhere, and green.
I always have to default to the teal colors when I need slabs and
Yeah.
stairs. And I'm like, I wish I could do blue or light blue, especially, or even purple. We do have purple,
Yeah.
but it doesn't go well with the darker
Yes.
purples.
Exactly, exactly. It kind of feels like an unnatural purple in some cases. Like I've only been able to use it in bathroom tiling. I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's
very
the
hard
only
to
place
use.
where it's worked. Otherwise, yes, good luck trying to use purple. Even for me, I've always wanted a blue kitchen sometimes. I mean, who
Huh.
doesn't want a blue kitchen? Maybe like a baby blue, or like that very stereotypical 1950s type of like bright blue, optimistic looking kitchen that looked like it might have been a toy kitchen almost. But like
Yeah.
that kind of blue color, I think might be kind of cool.
So circling back to the main topic of like how do you decide what to build in Minecraft when we're kind of relating that to what kind of style do you enjoy
Yeah.
building, that kind of helps you determine what you want to build. I was thinking about this and how I decide what I want to build is really just based on what interests me. Like I have many interests, but usually I'm drawn to specific styles just because I want to try it for myself. I see something, I get inspired by it, and I'm like, oh, I want to create something just like that. But I know some people they might see things they want to create, or but they still don't know what exactly to make. Do you have any thoughts on that? How to help people figure out what they can build when they're not sure how to build without doing the command slash what to build? Because that doesn't
Or
really help much.
slash help me or slash
That is a
despair
command
or
on
something like
BR
that.
slash what to build.
Oh, really?
Yes, but it doesn't really help because people will just spam it and get like all these random prompts and they're like,
Oh,
no,
that's fair.
no, no. And
That's
they're
fair.
scrolling through all of them.
And then the server just gets overwhelmed almost if
It will
everybody
say
was doing
things
that.
like a Star Wars themed castle or something like that.
This sounds like what I should have done for that video I did with Shovel, where I could have come in and voiced a bunch of different options as ChatGPT, maybe generating different ideas.
Yeah.
Come build a large tomato house or something. I don't know,
Hey, that would be
something
cool. Someone
completely
build a tomato
random.
house.
Tomato house. There you go. If you want to
I
practice
built a
your organic
rosebud house
structures.
once.
Oh, there we go. There you
Yeah.
go. Going back to your question, though, I think that starting off, of course, with what you want to do is very important because if you just want to go in there and build with no clue of what you want to build, I think that's going to be a much more of an uphill battle in starting somewhere. And I know for me, inspiration is really what's helped because I find that if I have this drive to want to build something or replicate it in Minecraft, that's what gets me going. If I don't have the drive to build something, there's a good chance I'm going to probably give up somewhere midway, even if it might be cool to build. But I think that if you don't have that drive, it's going to be a much trickier time
Yeah.
to try to get something built. So for me, for example, when I started doing my moderns, I had seen other people doing modern houses in Minecraft. I just did a quick image search on Google and it said, you know what? Instead of just the basic house or stealing a villager's house in survival, I'd rather just go ahead and build my own fun little player scale modern home, just so I could stand out from the rest of the vanilla the survival Minecraft crowd, because people were doing it and it looked kind of cool to do. So obviously I didn't have the shapes down. I kind of just made up some kind of pattern and crossed my fingers and hoped it looked like it was modern. And it did work, interestingly, actually. I remember the first time I dabbled with shaders, man, those houses looked pretty under shaders. But I look back now and I realize, wow, those things are just either overrated or basic or whatever. But I think that comes with time. But going back to the question, I think that,
You almost have to have a passion for it or a desire to do it.
yeah, yeah.
But
Did you
there,
find like in your case, Meg, with that? I don't know if
I
you
mean,
had any
that's how
input
it
on
is
this
for
yourself.
me.
Yeah.
I also need to want to do it in order to do something. I don't do anything unless I want to do it. Obviously, that is my motivator for knowing what to build. And I also, as I stated earlier, I'm just full of ideas all the time. That's not to say I don't get burnt out because I do, but I'm always thinking of ideas. They're always just
Mhm.
coming to me. So knowing what to build isn't really an issue for me. But I do know there are some people who, for example, even if you don't know what to build yourself, there are many people who build commissions So they're not really deciding what they are building, but they're still building, because they're doing it for somebody else, or they're being prompted to build
Yeah.
something. I think finding your style is different for someone who is choosing what to build on their own versus someone who's being told what to build, because they might be more restricted to a guideline that someone has set for them.
Yeah.
So I think if someone is doing something as a commission, they don't have to do all of that work of like, oh, what am I going to build? Their only job at that point is to help find inspiration
Just trying to fulfill, yeah,
fulfill
find
that
to
build. Yeah.
fulfill what the commission's for, right?
So that
Yeah.
is an option. If somebody doesn't really know what to build, you could always try doing commissions. I don't know how it works. I've never done a commission build, but
Well,
it is always an
I'll admit,
option.
neither have I, so if you know about commissions and have some input, let us know. I know some people that do, and normally it depends on whoever's asking. There will be guidelines, but I find that any kind of constraint or some bound or reference point you can put on whatever you want to build, I find it's a good place to start because even for me, if I'm given a wide open book, I find it very hard to pinpoint a specific idea just because there's so many possible things. For example, even as simple as trying to figure out what kind of building could fit in a piece of land, whether, especially if it's just an open piece of land that doesn't have four roads surrounding it, I'm going, huh, I wonder what I could fit here. And all of a sudden, then I have to come across or pick from one of several possible ideas that could be there. So any kind of constraint, I guess, through commissions or other
Or even
means like
contests.
contests are great, yes. Or if you actually have a dedicated space that might have some restriction in a sense to it, like dimensions, where you say, I'll build within this kind of piece of land, not just on a
Mm-hmm.
big super flat world or something like that. So setting the scene is good too. Whether it's, yeah, as you said, in the form of commissions or contests, or even just where you are going to build this thing too.
Going back to finding style, because knowing what you're going to build also kind of relates to finding a style within that category. So, if you're going to build a
Mhm.
castle, there are styles of castle. You could build a realistic castle, you could build a fantasy castle, you could build a medieval castle. Um, and again, that kind of ties into, oh, what are you most interested in? But I know for some people who are content creators, a lot of times their style is driven by, oh, what will get me the most attention? What will give me the most clicks and views and all of that? Do you find that you see that reflected a lot, where a certain style is done just because everyone else is doing it in a sense, not
Just being
because
like to be trendy almost or something like
yeah,
that, right?
some
Just kind of
styles
follow the
do come
trend.
across as trendy. That's a good way to put it.
Yes. Yeah, now it's interesting because for me, when I think of finding style, it could be for a specific build and a type of build, but I almost equate this with someone's own identity in Minecraft when it comes to, like, if I look at a build and say, "Oh, this is definitely a MegRae build" or something like that, versus somebody who built might build something similar, but you feel like you know somebody else built it because of those, whether it's certain trademarks or things like that. Going to your question though, when it comes to trendiness, I feel like that's a good place to start because obviously, if you're looking for a way to get seen, and I think from a content creation perspective, if you're just starting to try to build a following, then I've found that a lot of people do resort to these trendy building types or whatever happens to be hip at the time. Whether it's, I remember there was a whole cabin craze last year, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my creator friends were working on various different cabins. I almost actually eventually did try to hop on the trend, but eventually, and not so much for the trend, but just because I felt like trying my hands at a cabin.
Right. You just get
But that
inspired
ended
to
up
do it.
happening. Yes, but then that one obviously came out several months later, and I think it was already midsummer when that thing came
Then
out,
by
and
then
I
there's a
said,
new
"All right."
trend going on.
Like I wouldn't consider myself a consistent content creator. I'll admit that up front because of how rare I post. But I find that being able to showcase stuff that I feel like really is the style that I build in and something that I feel happy that I've built is what I find the most enjoyment in. Now, that could change very well down the road, but at least for now, I find that that's where I like it. Just building something that to me inherently feels like something of a Rainboom build. Now I know Meg, you probably haven't, but I know some other people that have kind of almost developed their own certain style. Like if I look at a house and I'll see, oh, that's a this and this person's kind of house. It looks like their sort of style.
Mm-hmm.
Or even it's interesting, especially when creators collab with one another. And if they have, let's say, some kind of group project, especially if there may be only two or three people that partake in this, it's really interesting then to see individual styles coming together. Because when you look at the build, and then you know the individual creators with their own building styles, you can see, oh yeah, it kind of looks like a mixing of them, where it's got this person's aspect of this, and then this other person's this one, and it's kind of interesting where you see them come together. So I feel like that kind of is where you get your identity for me in Minecraft, and that's sort of finding your style.
Yeah,
That's kind of how I see it
it might
almost.
take a
Yeah.
while too.
Oh,
You might
absolutely.
start off building
Absolutely.
trying to copy others more or less, but then over time, I feel like it just comes naturally.
It does.
I never sought out a specific style of building. It just kind of came, it just comes naturally where you can identify, oh yeah, that looks like a MegRae build. It wasn't like I was intentionally trying to make them all look the same. It's just like any art. You just naturally, or even handwriting, you know, everyone's got their own unique signature or way of making art.
Yeah, it kind of establishes itself. And even honestly, once you start sharing it and people will take notice of it, and it kind of, the community kind of helps you to find that style because of how they might respond to it. I know I'm going to plug in my city stuff, for example, once again, but well before what I'm currently doing. I know for the longest time, I had been trying to find this one city project file or world I could do and just spend years working on, because I know I'm never going to finish it within, let's say, just a year or two, because that would be much too short of a time scale. But throughout that whole process, I found that my building style kept changing.
Hmm.
And this is not just because of me finding new inspiration or new tips from people. Even, for instance, when you taught me how to build trees, that brought me away from just doing a slash slash forest command somewhere, because I found that that was not exactly what I was looking for back in my player skill worlds. But as I acquired more knowledge and started seeing other people that were kind of bent in a certain direction when they did their builds. Not that it was a negative thing that they were bent in a certain direction, but I think that additional inspiration uh, had an effect on me that said, you know, I'd like to try this out and maybe see if this could help my buildings much more closely resemble
This
my
is true.
original goal, right? So I think
Yeah.
that extra inspo for me has helped, obviously with time, to I guess come into the style that I am now, and then my own interests which also blend into theirs. So I feel like that's something. And I know you might be asking, if you're listening, well, how do I find my style? It might be something even that it might not be you alone, because I find that sometimes it's a community effort where people will take notice of the stuff that you build and say, you know, oh, and then eventually it becomes something that all of a sudden I think just clicks in one day, and then people will say, "Oh, hey, that's a you sort of style almost or something," and just feeling happy about it. Now, I don't know if you've encountered many people that have developed a style, but it was not intentional, and it almost becomes something that they've become notorious for, something that they don't want to associate with. Like I could jokingly say that the fact that I've been associated with bathrooms now would irk me. You know, for example, I always see a dozen. I actually kind of find it to be a really funny inside joke for
You're
people
the
that know
only
about that
Minecraft
one.
builder
But
I know who's associated with
with
bathrooms.
bathrooms, there you go. Right, because it's funny because all it started was just because I think there was one build somewhere where I apparently built one of the best toilets ever seen in Minecraft, and which to me is strange, because all it was, really, this is no joke. It was just a couple of stair blocks, a slab, maybe a full brick, the trap door, iron trap door for the toilet seat lid, and then maybe a toilet paper roll head or a button on the side, just to make it look like it was a toilet. I mean, some models I've done, they've had the elevated tanks like the old school toilets where you had to pull the cord down to flush or something like that. But I mean, without going into the whole bathroom tangent, apparently that's what I apparently was known for. And now I did not intend on being the bathroom guru anywhere in Minecraft, for sure not, absolutely not. But I guess it just became so synonymous with my builds that I, I just inherited the title of the bathroom expert, apparently,
That's funny.
somehow.
I actually associate you more with just the expert wallpaper maker.
Wallpaper, really?
Yeah, you have
Now,
what
that is
great
true because
wallpaper.
there are builds, yes, that's funny because there are homes, especially, well, I mean, I think it's because of the mid-century style because, a lot of people had really funky wallpapers back then, right? But
Right, but you
and
would use
that
blocks
goes
that
back to,
no one
yeah,
else would normally use because of that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun because it lends that kind of is a testament to the value of vanilla blocks. Like there are some you'd never think you would use in some places, but believe it or not, they work. The day when I discovered I could use hay bales as flooring to kind of give that sort of grainy yellow texture, man, that was amazing for that one kitchen. I found that very interesting. Even
Ah,
some
I've
people
never
use
tried
like the
that.
bee nest or the beehive. Is it what's the one that is not the one that looks like an actual beehive? Looks like a box. Is that the bee
Uh,
nest or beehive,
that's
whatever
the
block it is?
beehive, I think.
Beehive, right? Having that in an alternating pattern. I know people use that as a flooring one,
Yeah.
which looks really cool too. But stuff like that, like there are some blocks you can get really creative, and I think those bounds for me, this is kind of what helps me also with my kind of style is working with those constraints. I know we had I think we had an episode several whiles ago when we were talking about working with constraints versus being open. I think this is also kind of related to that, where you can use that concept to help determine what you feel is most comfortable to you when it comes to building. Because I think your style is what you're most comfortable with. It might take time to get there and feel satisfied with what you're building, but I think that it's definitely a very, very personal a discovery or encounter or even just a journey entirely.
And like you said, it's always evolving too, because
Yeah,
as new styles
absolutely.
develop, by whether it be by, your peers or just new blocks being added to the game, styles are always changing and developing. Only
Oh, sure.
recently I got into, or I was introduced to the debug stick, even though it's been around for years. It's one of those things
Oh,
I
that.
never really knew about. And now I'm like,
Uh,
oh, I've got to debug everything now.
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it? And it's funny because I used to be reluctant to use the debug stick because of how complex it seemed to go around and select every single block and make changes. That's when I also discovered the replace tool. For some reason, I mean, it was there, but
Oh yeah,
when
a
I think
love
you
replace
showed it to
tool.
me one
Yeah.
time, when I was trying to replace, I remember this in one of my streams from the old city. I remember specifically because I think, just killing time in a stream changing out I think it was the road lanes or like the lane, like the dashed lines on the roads and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And you were going, Rainboom, instead of just doing that, why don't you use the replace tool so you can actually, go back and then I started using this. But the funny thing is, at that time, I didn't see the value of it. Since I said I could just do this just as quickly as if I was using this tool. So it
Uh-huh.
doesn't make sense because I was so used to doing it by hand. But then I found out that it actually would keep block states. So I think I found the value, let's say nowadays when I do fencing, if I want to keep individual, just straight lines of fence without them connecting on the sides, then the replace tool could easily do that for where could just set that one and then click everywhere and they would
It's
all be
great
that
for
particular
texturing.
block.
But you know what? Since you
Yeah.
mentioned the dashes on the road, I got to introduce you to the dashes command.
People have been trying to do that
Yeah.
too. Yes, that's another one too. It's crazy, and that's another thing where the different commands have also helped facilitate things that I could never do before, where I would be afraid to do them, so that actually hampered on my building style. So I used to never want to build anything curved or diagonal or at an angle or something, even roads, because I could never figure out how to line them up properly. I was always afraid to get them wrong. I didn't have the tools for one. I didn't have the know-how either, until I started watching some reference points for people who talked about how you make these things slanted yet convincing, also learning the tools. Even there was this one video actually watching how math played a part. Interestingly, now obviously this is getting really specific, but how math played a part, and that actually caught my attention. And even to this day, that's my method of doing certain curves, which is very interesting how it all plays in. But without these tools, I feel like, and kind of as not just the building blocks are added, like new blocks and new releases and new inspo is found. I think with the different tools that you acquire that are under your belt, that
Mm-hmm.
also helps with style for sure, at least to make things easier.
And being able to recall them as you need them too, because that takes time. That's not something that you can. Learning a command doesn't mean you're automatically going to know how to apply it. It takes practice, and
Uh-huh.
that's it. It just takes a lot of
What was
practice.
this? There was one, you know what it was? Actually, it was the loft tool for me, where it took me the longest time to understand how that worked because I could understand world edit selections.
Uh
If you're
huh.
familiar with the different types, especially if you're using something like a poly or convex, where you can pick points kind of all over the place and build a shape out of them for your selection. But loft always confused me because I could never figure out what these frames meant until I think it took a bit of practice and trying them out. And then from there I said, perfect. Now I don't have to worry about curtains or weird shaped curvy roofs or whatever or funky things that kind of lend themselves to my style. So now I could work with those
We'll have
also
to
and
do a
no
full
problem.
episode just on different commands, because we're kind of going on a tangent about commands specifically.
I maybe if people want to, I guess favorite command. I mean, it could be a question that comes up sometime if no one's ever
Yeah,
asked it
it
yet.
probably
Go ahead and
there
put it
might be a
in.
question coming up, not in this episode, but maybe in the future about
Or
favorite
maybe we can
commands.
check in and see if this one has it. If it isn't asked in this section, I mean, do you have anything first off, Meg, that you
No,
wanted to tack on about building style?
I don't think so.
It all starts with passion and a drive for wanting to build whatever you want to build. If you're just looking for something to build, especially if you're just completely new to Minecraft for the first time, have never touched it before, but want to get started with something. I mean, and of course, also asking around or looking around to find some inspiration. Find that if something catches your eye and you're going, I want to build that, you've got a really good starting point. Even if it means starting to do something, I was going to say block for block, but if you're using a drawing, then it might be more like, I mean, it could be block for block from someone else's reference build or something. But it might start with making things look exact before you can start, going on your own, finding your own style and working on whatever feels best for you. But I think that's a process overall that does take time. So don't worry if it doesn't come to you right away, because I don't think it comes to very many people right away, if
And I
anything.
think it does with the style thing. It does mostly come naturally, and you'll just gradually pick up on new things the longer you build. At least that's how it was for me. I don't know. I see some builders coming into the scene relatively recently, like within the last year or two, and they are already knowing all of the techniques and all of the methods because they're
Oh yeah.
coming in at this stage. But for me, it was a very slow and grueling process of picking up, oh, this technique here and this technique here, and eventually they all come together where I'm being more consistent with them, where I actually have a more unified style just because I've been learning new techniques along the way.
I guess just being comfortable with the fact that it could take time. I know even for my case now, we're coming up on 10 years of me trying to figure out my style. I could say even now,
Or just of
yeah.
building, yeah.
Oh, something like that. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if I don't count the years I was inactive, which is it kind of comes down to 8 or 9, but still, it's a long process. So I can tell you that, and there have been times I honestly have had times where I felt like, maybe it's time to go ahead and hang it up and uninstall this program and just kind of leave Minecraft forever. But having that drive again, just something told me to come back and give it a try. And I think just sticking with that and following along, being open to that journey. And it might mean being uncomfortable at times if you're trying to learn tools. The debug stick was definitely an interesting thing, amongst other tools that we've talked about, which we could do a whole other episode on. But I think just keeping your mind open, really, at the end of the day, is really important to seeing what you think works for your style, because you might find something that you like. You might find that you don't like it later on, and you may have to change. So, hey, it can happen. Your style could develop, as I'm sure Meg's and mine certainly are as we speak.
I want to transition now to the community questions. First question I have was actually kind of what sparked this topic idea in general, because we had a
Okay.
question asking, what is your most intimidating build style?
Oh,
And I actually want to tack onto this my own
sweet.
question. So, what is your most
Okay.
intimidating build style? And then also answer, is there like a particular style that you want to learn that you don't currently know? Because that could be
Okay.
part of what
As
is
extension, yeah.
intimidating.
Sure. Or it could be the opposite, where it might be a style that you dread and one that you want to learn. Okay. Do you have anything that comes to mind offhand, Meg,
Well,
or you
for
want me to go
me,
first?
okay, so intimidating build style. Gotta think about it. I mean, I think just anything structural. I don't know, because
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of any styles that I don't currently do that I want to learn. I'm sure there are
Hmm.
some, mainly structure. I wouldn't necessarily say it's intimidating, but it's definitely more challenging for me,
Yeah.
which is strange. People think structure is easier than organic, and I disagree. Structure takes a lot longer than organics do. So, and I wouldn't necessarily say they're intimidating, but I feel like I struggle through them more.
I see. I see. But I mean, yeah, because structures can get pretty complex, and it depends on how much you're actually doing as part of the structures. I'm sure that that always plays a big part in it. Absolutely.
Oh, I know an intimidating build style. Anything with mega terrain.
Yep.
Terrain is
I
a
know that
pain.
feeling. Yes, terrain is. Now there's some people that love terrain. I'd love to get to meet you because I think I would be able to benefit from some
We'll have
tips.
to get a terrain
Um,
expert on here at some point.
I think so. That could be a potential guest. Now, funny you mentioned structure in general as an intimidating or challenging build style, because I come from the land of where organics, for me, are the intimidating or
Mm-hmm.
challenging build style, simply because I have not yet really mastered or really gotten the eye yet for being able to find, anatomic proportions or finding curves to go in the right places, especially the fact that these things are not always at right angles to the world. So especially anything very free flowing and almost practically uh, it's void of anything related to the three axes in Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
I think for
And I
me
think for
is
me, it
definitely
just comes
challenging.
naturally because I like to do art already. And I've always built both structure and organics, but I'm just known for the organics. But I still say structure is more intimidating to me because some things in particular, especially odd structural shapes, like for example, like a vehicle,
Oh
like a
yeah.
ship. Ships are hard.
Oh yes.
They're so
They
hard.
they are interesting. I know there's some people that build massive sailboats, and those things are insane. But for me, if I wanted to learn something, it'd be really funny if I said trees, and Meg's probably gonna be shaking her head like, "Come on, Rainbow, I
I'll
taught you how
teach
to
you how
build
to build
trees."
trees. I can teach you.
As some people say, well, and eventually I'll be one of those people that say, "I love trees." But no, I would actually, well, organics is definitely something I'd like to get better at, but I actually think that if I'm specifically thinking structure, really getting into some of the more fantasy medieval stuff, because interestingly,
Mm,
some of it could lend itself to some more organic elements because they're not
true.
exactly some building styles are not exactly the straightest when it comes to compared to modern, which is obviously very clean lines all around. And I think just the nature of builds that are more organic definitely would be interesting. Like I'd like to be comfortable with anything whether or not it has straight lines, basically, to be able to get a
Ah,
good eye for that sort of thing. Because I've only seen in straight lines and maybe curves, but to be able to bridge that. And I think, you know what, I'll agree with you also with anything with terrain, because trying to incorporate a build into some kind of terrain for me has always been interesting since if I manually shape it, it's very challenging. Sometimes it looks unnatural, even if my curves are good, but in the context of the whole terrain, it's terrible, absolutely terrible.
actually, I don't know if I answered a style I want to learn. I did say structure, but I mean, I'm kind of teaching that to myself already.
Well,
But
that's fair. Well, I mean, this build is actually this common one I think you're doing is a pretty good testament to that.
yeah, it's me practicing a lot of different stuff that I do want to get better at steampunk specifically, oddly enough, mainly because I think of cool ideas that could incorporate steampunk, but they're so challenging with all of the gizmos and gadgets or whatever gears, everything that you
Oh
could
yeah,
possibly
all the
include in a
little
steampunk.
cogs.
I've only done one
Yeah.
steampunk build ever, and it was pretty challenging, but that's definitely a style that I would love to practice more and just get better at.
Yeah. Yeah, that might be really cool for sure. I was going to say this next one has nothing to do with intimidating build styles or anything,
Oh
but I
no.
think this is a very interesting one. And I can only imagine because I knowing certain communities, I can probably see where this what the desired answer is here. But somebody asked, "What's your favorite body cleaning product?"
We all know what the answer they're looking for is.
That they're looking for is. Now, what if I told you I don't use body cleaning? I'm kidding. Now, obviously, I have to use some kind of body cleaning product. Soap, hand soap,
I was going to say
what
hand
else is on
soap.
there? Yeah,
I was
that's
going to
always
say hand
good.
soap is my favorite because that's probably the one I use the most or, most
Yes,
throughout the day. Most essential
exactly.
one.
Yeah. If I'm not able to lather my entire body, at least having the soap, and especially if it's a wonderfully fragranced soap, that's always good too.
For anyone listening who doesn't get this inside joke, the desirable answer is shampoo, but we are going to answer hand soap as our favorite
Yes,
body cleaning
but
product.
not to say we don't use shampoo
We do
every once
use
in a while,
shampoo as well, but
maybe as well.
it's not our
But
favorite, sadly.
haha,
At
haha.
least
Well,
not mine.
here here come the people that are probably looking for that answer. They'll step forward and they'll probably come and say, "Hey, Meg, Rainboom, do you better take that back or else." Or something like that. But okay, let's see what the next question is, Meg. You can
Oh,
describe
okay.
this one.
This one's a bit different. It says describe your desk or wherever you are now while creating content. Is it cluttered, neat, any unique items or inspiration or comfort? My desk is definitely always a cluttered mess, partially because it's pretty small, so I don't have much space. But currently it's got like a water bottle, a sketchbook, my phone, another cup that's empty, a bunch of random equipment from external drives, my drawing tablet. That's
Yeah.
most of it. Of course, my keyboard.
Hmm.
It sounds like it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's all cluttered on a little desk space. So
I guess if you did picture everything together and depending on the definition of short or small
yeah,
desk space,
and
then
as
it
far
would
as
probably look
having
pretty,
items of
yeah.
inspiration, I have nothing like that around me. I'm every time I sit and work, I'm just focused on the screen, so I'm not really looking
That's fair.
around me at the
And
clutter
the
and
pictures
mess.
probably, when you look for source or material, will probably come from online searches or other
Right.
places that are not physical, right? So I laughed so hard at the question because my desk, now you mentioned yours is small. I consider mine big in the sense that it's an L-shaped desk. But the
Uh-huh.
problem is, you think with all that desk space, there could be some empty areas. No, it's actually it's a terrible clutter right now. And in fact, yesterday I acquired another typewriter on here, so now that's also eating up more space. So if I were to go through everything on my desk, I think this podcast would run for another 4 hours. Everything for me here, though, because my desk is L-shaped, everything here counts as my desk. So obviously, aside from my computer tower and monitors and keyboard, all that stuff sitting here, you always got to make sure that, well, I have also my side, because I also my if I'm working from home, I'll actually kind of pull off to the side and I have a bit of empty space there. But several bits of shelving, lots of loose wires, because actually, if I'm not doing content or anything in Minecraft, I'm actually working on restoring old vintage machines, if you didn't know me for doing that. So there are a couple old typewriters sitting around me right now. There's one that I still have yet to really take apart because I wanted to deep clean it. Might be the same thing for this new one I have. And then just a bunch of more of those that are off the desk. I'm not even going to go into those ones right now. And interestingly, I actually have three lamps here, but
Oh.
really only I think one of them that I use actively. So I have a clamp on lamp, which is actually kind of off a ways from my desk. Used to be my main one, but I mean it's pretty bright, but it wasn't quite fitting the aesthetic I was looking for. Now, in theory, I would hope to think that I could use my desk as a source of inspiration if I'm feeling like I want to build something mid-century, because I feel like the more I make my space look like it might be of a mid-century sort of thing, and seeing the shapes and the designs of the era, the more I'll probably want to build something mid-century. So it kind of might potentially serve as inspiration for me. But right
Oh,
now it's a cluttered mess, so I don't think it will. The last thing I'll mention is, of course, the rotary phone because you can never forget the rotary
Ah,
phone, which will
yes.
ring. And if I do need to dial out somewhere, I will dial from there, and maybe even into a VC because that does sometimes happen. If people need me to go do some what they call time traveling to kind of join a call for that purpose.
I did
Sorry, you were saying
I did
something.
forget to mention I do have a couple of my builds as posters behind me, and
Yes.
they're kind
Yeah.
of there for inspiration or decoration, but I honestly never see them because they're to my back. But they are there all the same.
But if you ever want to revel back, look back at something that you built and just kind of revel in
It is neat to see
that
them on the walls.
satisfaction,
I
it's
should
always
print
fun.
off
Oh
more.
yeah. Yeah, you should. You should. Put them on postcards or something. Like I have a bunch of other postcards. There's one of my build that I still have yet to send. Actually, they're just sitting there. I haven't been sending postcards, mostly letters nowadays. But hey, if you want a postcard, if you're listening to this, I have several postcards. If you, Meg, if you want a postcard, you can always get one too,
Oh,
potentially
sure.
one of these days. Whatever. But so I guess for both of us, it seems like the consensus is that we don't really exactly have the tidiest
We're
desks
both pretty
currently.
cluttered. But that's because I'm so
Yes.
preoccupied with building that I just don't pay attention.
Uh,
Like, eh.
and much the same for me too. And the thing is, I don't know about you, but once I put something somewhere and get used to it in that position, it's not moving because the moment I move it, it's
You're
going to
gonna
throw
forget where it
off
is, or like, where did I put that?
exactly that, or it's going to feel awkward,
Or it's not going to
which
be
is really
around when you need
strange.
it.
Yeah, it's like even if I shift my keyboard a little ways over a certain direction, if I try to start typing there, I feel like something doesn't feel right here. I think this keyboard is shifted over. Let me move it back and things like that all of a sudden. And then to try to regain it's like when someone else sits in your car and changes the driver's seat but doesn't put it back or something
Oh,
like that. Or
yeah.
you'll know somebody sat there, or you have to figure out where your bearings are. Anyway, that's another tangent for another time. Speaking of tangents, this one's a very tangential question, and I feel like some people want some debate out of this, but here we go. Pineapple on pizza, illegal or legal?
I don't care what you do with your pizza.
Yeah, you
It
might
doesn't
be.
bother me.
Exactly. I was gonna say you might have wanted a debate, but unfortunately, all I can tell you is you do you. I personally don't normally put them on there because I'm just looking for a basic pizza. So it's usually we'll just have pepperoni, maybe mushrooms or green peppers, but not to say that I will be offended if you put
Hmm.
pineapple on your pizza.
I can't control what other people find enjoyable with their taste buds, so
Wasn't there a water sort of debate kind of by a similar vein or something? Or maybe it
a
was water
water?
wet? Anyways, it might
Oh,
be some other kind of hot topic like that where people would contest or try to defend one side over the other. But unfortunately, I guess you do you. That's pretty
so
much
the
my
answer
take on that one.
is legal.
Legal.
It is legal,
Alrighty.
but it is not preferable for my taste.
And here, one more thing, Meg. You can take the
And the last question we have, also not related to Minecraft. We have a bunch of just random ones today. When you hear the phrase, let the cat out of the bag, what kind of bag do you imagine the cat is being let out of? Is it a burlap sack, a duffel bag, a grocery bag? Personally, I imagine a book bag. That was from the person asking. They say he imagines a book bag.
a book bag. It's an
I don't know
interesting
really
question.
what I picture when I hear that.
Well, now that I see book bag, that almost feels like the sort of thing that or burlap sack were the two things I
Maybe a
was thinking
paper
of.
bag is what I think of.
Paper bag, yes, potentially that too. It definitely was not something plastic for me. Whenever I thought of this expression, even though I never really overthought this expression, I just because usually it was either spilling beans or spilling tea or some other thing rather than cats out of the bag. But it was always something that was of a papery or rough texture. So yeah, paper bag, burlap sack, book bag are probably the three things that come to mind for me. But it's interesting people would wonder the
I've
specific
never ever
details.
thought about it before.
Are we supposed to assume this is maybe Garfield or a Cheshire cat or something? That might be the other question people ask, if what kind of cat is coming out of the bag here, or something
Yeah.
like that. Or which one of the 13 cat variants in Minecraft could it be? Is it like whatever if is it 13? Whatever number it
Oh,
is.
I don't know. I
Um
don't know that off the top of
but
my head.
well yeah, would you also think a burlap like a paper
No,
bag or book
in
bag, Meg?
Minecraft it would be letting a cat out of a bundle.
Oh yes, it's true.
Which I don't know. Are those in the game yet? I don't know. Maybe they are in Bedrock
Potentially,
or
I know some
something.
mods
I
that
don't
do
know.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was thinking they're actually it's shoving a cat off a chest. I feel like is probably what they're
Yes.
what the in-game expression might be. Push that cat off the chest, or whatever the case is. But that's an interesting one. I mean, again, without you listening, these questions wouldn't come to be. So, honestly, thank you for the questions that we've been continually receiving as well. And if you ever want to ask questions, you can always let us know of what they are, or if you happen to be on Meg's server, there is a dedicated channel specifically for podcast
And
questions.
they
So
can
if you
be
want to,
Minecraft related or not. They
or
can be
not,
anything.
yeah,
It's just
anything
extra
goes.
discussion.
And obviously, you can see where we could totally go on tangents with some of these questions, and where we actually will not go on tangents with these questions. So I'm glad I don't suffer from having to speak for hours on end about certain things. Except obviously the podcast topic, which I always love to talk about, as maybe you may have seen in this latest episode. But hey, I think if you ever want to catch any of our previous episodes, if you aren't already on either YouTube or Spotify or any of your favorite podcasting platforms of that sort, then that's where you can find this podcast. So yeah, be sure to check out either of those for when the next episode will be coming out. But anyways, thanks for listening and checking out this episode. And I guess until the next one comes out, we will see you then.
Bye.